Welcome to AVAIYA, Catherine.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you.
Yeah, so great to have you. And I loved reading about you and your insights around menopause. And I can't wait to hear your experience. Let's first talk about your own personal experience. Can you talk a little bit about you arriving at menopause and what that was like for you?
Yeah, well, menopause it's not the same as the onset of menstruation, right? Where you get the blood and it's very clear that you've arrived at that threshold. With menopause, it kind of sneaks up on you. And I wasn't really aware that I was in perimenopause in my early 40s. I thought that it was just me having a hard time, right? So it snuck up on me, and I was completely unprepared for it because I thought menopause happened when you were in your 50s. And it kind of felt like the dirty word, within my peer group. Um, and I think I also arrived at that threshold feeling depleted, feeling exhausted, because like so many other women, I'd lived my life in overserving, overgiving, underreceiving. And, essentially my endocrine system, my hormonal system was burnt out, um, which makes the initiation that much more difficult.
And so, given that you felt this depletion, exhaustion, I guess in that process of arriving there and it kind of having snuck up on you, like you said, what kind of insights did you gain in that process? Anything you could talk about that? I know also we're going to relate this back to trauma healing, so I'm curious how that ties in.
Yeah. Well, what I came to realize that menopause or perimenopause is really the report card on your health. It shows you how you've been living to date. And so, I realized that there was a lot of things that I thought I was really healthy, right? And my menopause report card showed me that I wasn't, right? And there were kind of some really fundamental things I needed to address in my health. And when I use the word health, I talk into the broader sense of that word, looking also into like nervous system health. Because the thing is that the endocrine system, which is like the hormonal system, and the nervous system are so inextricably linked that if you have unprocessed trauma, when you arrive at menopause and the hormones start to fluctuate, all of that unprocessed trauma gets activated. So we can see it as an opportunity. It can be sometimes hard to feel that at the time because it can feel incredibly overwhelming to be in this state of flux where, the sense is that the ground isn't beneath you anymore. Mm-hmm. And then if we look at menopause through a more kind of psychological perspective, and we consider like the phases of menopause, well, the first stage of menopause is going into separation, betrayal, right? It's kind of letting things go. It's a giving way to that and feeling the grief of that. So we have to go through these deep psychological processes whilst our nervous system isn't feeling robust and resilient.
Interesting. I've never, in my very short journey of perimenopause so far, which has only really been over the last year or so, I've never linked it to unprocessed trauma and, like you said, that report card. So are you saying that the more symptoms we have in perimenopause are indicative of more things like unprocessed trauma or issues with like imbalance in our nervous system?
Totally, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
I mean, it
And
wasn't until later that I discovered that hot flushes are linked to elevated blood glucose levels. And as we go through menopause, many of us experience insulin resistance because we've got high cortisol levels, which creates insulin resistance over a long period of time. So, when I kind of transitioned through perimenopause and through menopause, I discovered my blood glucose levels were at pre-diabetic levels. Now you can see me, right? I'm slim. I'm not a kind of typical candidate for diabetes. And yet that's what was happening in my body as a consequence of like these elevated cortisol levels.
And okay, so let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about the nervous system and how it impacts our initiation of menopause. And then also, what can we do to support a healthy nervous system during this transition?
Sure. Yeah. So we can think about like nervous system health is happening within a window, right? And within that window, there's like regulation happening. So it means we can kind of cope with stress coming in to the system to a degree. And stress isn't a bad thing. You know, we don't want to avoid stress, but we want to be able to have the capacity to meet stress. But if that window is already kind of quite limited, so above and beyond, I mean, I'm showing you this with my hands, but kind of like if we imagine this window and above it, we move into kind of hyper states of arousal, so fight, flight responses. And if we go kind of below the window, we drop into hypo states of nervous system arousal, so like the freeze states. Then if that window is quite narrow, then as the stress of menopause arrives with the hormonal dysregulation, we don't have a lot of bandwidth to be able to cope with the change. So we start spending kind of increasing times outside of this window of tolerance and in dysregulation.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.